How you doing, Musa?
I'm all right, Jonathan. I'm sweltering in this heat.
Really? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sweltering. Well, I'm not sweltering. It's cooled down today a little bit. I think I was on calls this week, people's internet just started breaking off at one point a couple of days ago. I think it was just too hot for things to cope. A very sort of British story. The weather takes us down, but it was very hot. And as much as I subscribed to this podcast, the heat didn't change at all. It didn't affect it in the slightest. Did you try that method? I heard it worked very well. You subscribe to the podcast, and the heat
It's
goes
their
down. It
method.
doesn't work. That doesn't do it. So, what do you make of it all? What do you make of hot weather?
Well, I mean, don't we complain about everything, Jonathan? We, as a country, we can't handle the snow. We can't handle the heat. We can't handle it when the trains don't run on time. We can't handle it when we have to ice up the roads. We're always are we always in this kind of sense of lament? We're always complaining about something. In fact, I'll tell you what, the Friday sermon this week was
Sorry,
actually about
what's the Friday sermon?
the Friday sermon. So Muslims on a Friday they have a sermon, right? I send the Friday prayers and they hear a sermon. So the imam in my mosque is from Ghana, and he decided to riff off. He decided to riff off the weather for the topic for his sermon. So he was just talking about, okay, well, and there were loads of kids in the mosque as well. Presumably, they hadn't gone to school. The school was shut. So he decided to do a talk on gratefulness, right? And well, we're talking about the heat here, but perhaps we should be grateful for for British weather because in India or Pakistan or the Gulf countries or African countries, this kind of heat is quite regular. In fact, it's been what 36, 37. I mean, in these countries, it's not unusual to be at 46, 47. Especially in the hot summer months. And so we're not used to this in Europe, isn't it? But people all over the world do live in these kind of more extreme weathers, and they seems to be becoming more extreme.
Well, yeah, it is becoming more extreme, and you look at the graphs, and the
Yeah.
overall picture is it's becoming more extreme. And I remember when I was a teenager, I had a Guinness Book of Records, and it said the hottest place on the earth ever recorded was 53 degrees centigrade. And I was thinking, I thought that was very hot then, but I think that's the past. But I mean, part of the thing with English weather is it's so changeable because we've got so many weather fronts, or we have at the moment. That's likely to change as well.
Mm.
But we've got so many weather fronts, so you get a couple of weeks of hot, a couple of weeks of cold, a couple of weeks. See, there's very little point in a sense of building in the big infrastructure because you don't have the extremes last for a short while. Whereas if you know you're going to have 4 months of snow or 4 months of heat, you build in those systems, and we just have
That's true.
so far. But this is about
Yeah.
to change, and of course, if the Gulf Stream and other things get disrupted, I mean, massive changes. Presuming we can adjust agriculture quick enough. I mean, whoever we are, I'm not quite sure who's calling the shots on this one. Um, so yeah, I mean, when you've got hot weather, the point is, what are you going to do about it? No one's going to change behaviour. No one's going to stop driving cars. No one's going to sit at home and protest and refuse to take part in anything. Everyone's
Ah,
at best they're just going to chat.
let me
Well,
stop
what's
you
the
there,
difference?
Johnson. You're just making this massively. I mean, I actually happen to agree with you, but just to be devil's advocate,
No, no,
changes in weather have been happening for since time immemorial. There
uh-huh.
was a time. This is what I've heard, right? There was a time when they were growing grapes in
Mhm.
Britain in
Yeah,
December or something like this. I don't know. Yeah, so climate change is
but so why?
completely natural. Yeah,
I,
phenomenal. It
I,
has nothing to do with.
I'm not,
I
I'm not,
don't.
I'm not, I'm not a fan of devil's advocating because it's really as a
Okay.
moderation technique. Maybe what? Why don't you actually believe that?
Look,
Because
I'm
you're a
going to say.
scientist. So this is why I'm
I'm,
interested. You're a scientist
I'm going to say some four-letter words, but that's obviously rubbish. No, no,
because
no. Well, I would say a few things. No serious scientists have ever said that. I've heard a lot of politicians say it. Heard a lot of politicians on GB News say it. I've heard a lot of people with money in the game saying things like this, right? I've heard a few people with like a couple of billion dollars invested in the oil and gas companies saying it, right? But I've never come across any consensus or serious scientific opinion which says that climate change is firstly, climate change is not happening. Secondly, that it's not happening because of man-made intervention. I think the other things that I would say, because I might be a scientist, but I'm not a scientist or a specialist in this area, right? So the first thing I've just said is you go on kind of trust of the reputations of the people who are known to be experts on the field. The second thing is I travel quite a lot actually. You know, um, I travel to Pakistan. I travel to Africa. I can see. You don't even need to travel anymore. You know, we can see climate change happening in our lifetimes before our very eyes. We can see more extreme weather events happening. This well, heat wave that's going on. I think there's something like, was it 40 kids have died in France over the last week. You know,
because
um,
of
because of the extreme heat. We're not
they
adapted to this kind of heat, isn't it? So when you see a
well,
change, you see a change in kind of weather patterns, then I think that tells you something. So it's not just blizzards from afar.
hang on, Musa.
Yeah,
You just told me that in large parts of the world, this sort of weather, these temperatures, I mean, their temperatures are going to
you
go
sure?
up and are going up, but these temperatures we're getting are everyday life. So why did 40 people in
No, no, no,
France
no,
die?
no, no. Hang about. I travel to Pakistan every year, right? And in Pakistan, I spent 2 weeks there just doing charity work in Pakistan. Um, and I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, and I've been my whole life on and off to Pakistan. Okay, the whole monsoon pattern has changed in Pakistan over my life. 2 years ago in Pakistan, almost a third of the country was submerged under serious flooding.
Mhm.
The what essentially happens is it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and then around April, and then in kind of May, June, you have serious rains, right? We used to know that these monsoon patterns were very bad in Bangladesh, which is, a whole country away. Now we're seeing the same things happening in Pakistan. So Pakistan has always been hot, but now it's hotter.
Okay, so look, you're not
Yeah.
telling me anything I don't know and what anything anyone else knows. So my question is, what are you doing about it, and what can you do about it? Or are you just watching it happen and going along with it and
Hang about you.
carrying on the
You
process?
know, you're jumping far too
No,
far,
that's not
far
as far.
further.
Look, look.
I haven't finished the conversation. The
I,
question that you had.
I tell you
No,
what.
the question that you asked me is, how do you know that this is happening? Now
Yeah,
I've
okay,
begun to
okay.
outline my argument, and you've just
Yes,
dismissed
but
it as,
okay. So you're saying
yeah,
you have witnessed in your lifetime, which doesn't, by the way, tell us anything about climatic change, especially if it carries on for hundreds of years.
sure,
What you witness in your lifetime is a minor data point. But
of course.
well, okay, let's come briefly back.
I'm just,
Let come back
I'm
briefly
just,
back. Can I ask you a
let
question?
yeah,
Uh,
go on.
you understand how scientific communities work.
Yeah, yeah, sure,
So there are probably one or two scientists, or 20, 100, or maybe 500 who disagree with all this stuff, or who say
of
it's not
course,
quite how they're describing it. How does a scientific community work in order to you to feel
sure.
confident in the knowledge they're
So,
providing?
so this is what I'm trying to get to, Jonathan. Is you have to triangulate your knowledge. So you have to triangulate, the papers that you're reading, the stats that are being done, but you have to have multiple converging lines of anything, whether you're talking about cannabis and psychosis, you're talking about climate change and whether it's man-made, you have to have multiple converging lines of evidence, which show, you can't just ask one question in one way. You have to look all around the issue, right? And that kind of triangulation is the best way of understanding the truth, and it's something that I'll use in my clinical practice as well. A patient will come to me, for example, and say that they don't drink much alcohol, and I'll say, okay. But then I look at their blood tests, and there's some blood tests which show me that they're drinking too much alcohol. Their wife is telling me they're drinking too much alcohol, and the medical record is telling me they're drinking too much alcohol. I know then they're drinking too much alcohol, right? So, and that's the nature of knowledge. You have to seek it from multiple sources. So, whereas most scientists would say exactly what you've said, oh, your personal experience is just one data point. I think that's rubbish. I think that as a psychiatrist, I think we have to take our experience and give it its due weight. We have to give the papers their due weight. We have to give the stats their due weight. And the other thing is, of course, that historically, since the 1980s, we've been hearing that climate change is just about to come. I mean, I was at school, I was probably my children's age, it was probably 5 or 6. I was hearing about acid rain and, the water cycle and what were the CFCs, which they used to have in burger packing and all of this, the ozone layer, right? So we've known this has been coming for a long time, and now it's here. So I think these are the ways I know this, right? You want to get to a harder question is, what am I doing about it?
Yep. Okay.
Unpack. What are you doing about it, Jonathan?
No, I'd like you to go first. I'd like to know because I
My my
think this
my
is a
my
major
my
issue.
my answers are going to be unpopular.
Okay.
A few years ago, my kids came home and they'd seen this Richard Attenborough documentary about, I think, all this plastic in the oceans and stuff, and they're like, "Daddy, we need to do something about the environment." This was in 2022, mind you. And so then my wife was also saying, "Yeah, we need to do something," um, and also at that time, of course, petrol was becoming more expensive. So I bought 2 electric vehicles. That was my kind of contribution to the environment at that point.
Do you want to tell us more?
I'm not going to tell you anymore, John. I'm not going to tell yeah, because I think you've already told me to set fire to my cars and burn them,
I
isn't
said I won't set foot in your car,
it?
and I find
Have
it very
you?
I find it very hypocritical.
Hang about. What do you mean? I just drove you
Oh,
from
you did,
the
didn't you?
airport.
Okay. You
Yeah.
see, well, there you go. There's the thing.
What is it?
No,
Why
no.
why am I
There's the
why
thing.
am I
There's the
being?
thing. Yeah, yeah. There's the thing. Yeah. So I mean, here we go. Because I go, okay, this what this car represents in terms of how we organize economy and power, and how we deal with the power of individuals
Sure,
who
sure.
are well, to me, strikes me as psychopathic and
Yeah.
psychotic actually at the same time, and and probably with a few other things. But we as long as they're making money, who cares? And in a sense, I react against that, and then I find myself, it's because it causes, there's something called convenience. We slip back into it.
Do you do
It's so
you?
there's
Let me
something
ask you a
about
question. Do
let me
you
just
do?
say one more thing. There's something about the human being, which, as Kahneman noticed, is very Daniel Kahneman noticed. There's something quite lazy about us. We will go to the easiest form of what's going on, and that's dangerous.
Well, I mean, that's just the power of the markets, isn't it?
Is it?
Mm.
What do you mean
Do
the
you
power
buy?
of the markets?
Well, I mean, people will buy at a particular price, at the best price they can, the quantity of goods which they need to acquire. If I'll tell you, for example, Teslas are probably about 10 grand cheaper than their competitors at the moment, probably about 7 or 8 grand. Then there are other kind of that in that class of car, right?
Hmm.
Compared to the comparative Audi or the BMW.
And the point
Yeah,
is,
there's that. So the Tesla is going to sell, isn't it? Because it's cheaper.
Well, that's just.
It's cheaper
Yeah,
and it's
okay,
and it's
look, I'm going to
same
give
quality
you.
build.
I'm going to
Yeah,
give you an example why that wasn't right. So if you
yeah.
get on your Tesla and it was a rubbishy drive, and it didn't quite work, and the door didn't open, and the navigation took you to the wrong place, and it broke down 3 times on the way, and it was cheaper, that wouldn't help you. So there are other things. It's the convenience.
Sure.
So one of the things I know from my work is we create good services by making things smoother and easier and more more meaningful to the lazy part of us. And not only we do that, we reassure people with things that offer them something which they kind of want. We almost distract them. So, for example, let's say you're driving a Tesla, which is enriching someone whose views are actually threatening your whole community and making them a scapegoat, and he's ploughing money into doing that. And you go, and he says, "Oh, but I've got this new feature on the Tesla.
No, then
Hang on, I've got this new feature on the Tesla, which is going to make this, and it's going to make it better value." And you think, okay, that's actually worth the trade. That's worth the trade. And you say to me, I'll pick you up. I think, oh, that's nice. I get picked up, we chat, and it's going to be nice. The thing is, this is going on constantly. And the thing that sells you your favorite washing powder, that method that sells you a washing powder or a conditioner, clothes conditioner, which you don't really need. I mean, they've managed to sell us clothes conditioner. It was a need we never have, and now we need it. So that thing that makes your clothes fresh for half a day, or smell fresh, they're not only fresher. They're doing this constantly. So if I ran a company that was totally toxic and odious and causing problems, all I really need to do is then give us some messaging about the good stuff it's doing and how it's helping me. And I think, fantastic.
okay.
And I almost silo the problems away because I like the benefits, because that's where I go.
Hang about. I'm not comfortable with this conversation because it's too close to home. But let's just which is why I was trying to avoid answering your question. But on a more serious note, let's just unpack some of this as well. Right. Firstly, I bought the cars in 2022 before I knew the political positions of the person who had it, right? I don't even know whether it sits as an argument. The second thing I would say is this guy is now a trillionaire. You know, the car, a couple of grand will go to him, right? Yeah. It does. Yeah, it doesn't. From my transaction, it doesn't mean anything to him. He's gonna, do his evil machinations to take over the world. Whatever I do, what am I doing except for virtue signaling, which is just a waste of time? I might as well just work out: does this car suit my needs? Is it the best in the range? And the most value for money? And forget about what I'm doing with him, right? What is the point?
And there you just address the whole thing of climate.
Sure.
Because I can look at this thing rolling out of control. All the predictions is it will roll out of control. I realise there's nothing I can particularly do. I can't actually do anything about it. So therefore, I do nothing. And in fact, I continue whatever I'm doing in order to. I don't really change my behaviour much, or maybe here and there where I can, and some sort of thing which becomes meaningful to me. But as everything mounts up, is absolutely tokenistic, because I can't really do much, at least as an individual. And of course, if we keep saying the responsibility for all this lies with the individual, then there's less and less I can do. But so I've got this sort of lazy sort of thing, and I'm governed towards some sort of pleasures. So as long as you keep feeding me bread and circuses, as long as you keep feeding me some nice stuff, and this car feels nice, the seats come around me, and this is, I mean, the thing is, some of this isn't disingenuous. A lot of companies that provide services, even big, slightly worrying companies that provide services, want to make the service as good as possible for the person. They do that is part of customer delivery. But by doing that, it offsets in us. We go, well, it is rather nice after all. So I keep doing it. I keep using it. How can I even drop out of climate? How can I
no.
change
Okay,
all that?
okay. No. I mean, the thing is that I think you're applying a very moralistic lens to what could be argued to be an economic question, right? And what you have to understand is that there has been good progress made upon in many facets of a kind of green economy. Do you know how much of Britain's energy is wind power driven
Do,
presently?
do tell.
I believe it's something like it's 70 to 80%. It's a huge amount.
Wind power.
It's yeah. The national grid, the national
National
grid.
grids.
Yeah. You can look this up, right? So and that's because the behind the scenes, the British government has been working to its credit over several years, so several decades, to be based upon renewable sources of energy, and it's been doing very well. That's one example. Another example I could tell you is that in the last 2 or 3 years, Pakistan, which is a completely different country, completely
Mm-hmm.
different power crisis, all of this, right,
Mm-hmm.
has had one of the fastest transitions across the world to solar power because basically uh, electricity bills became
Mm-hmm.
exorbitantly very expensive,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody decided to basically put up solar panels, which they get cheaply, basically from China, and so they have solved a large part of their um, electricity generation problem uh, just through the power of the markets, basically, right? And it hasn't solved everything, and this still affects the poorest the most, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
they're having to pay thousands of rupees,
Mm-hmm.
tens of thousands of rupees, just to
Okay.
power a light bulb. So the the point is that there are real changes that can happen. There are other changes that can happen within certain economic contexts. I think that sulfur dioxide used to be a massive problem,
Mm-hmm.
and there was, I believe, a token system that was set up in place.
Mm-hmm.
About if you're a company, I can't remember the story exactly, but if you're a company, you have certain tokens you can purchase, and that allows you to pollute, and then hence this essentially resolved the problem of sulfur dioxide, right? And so um, there are things we can do about it, but as an individual, Jonathan, railing against the wind, we're not going to do anything. I'm not going to solve climate change on my own, am I? I'm going to solve it when there are systems and in place which could be economic or facilitated by governments, which allow me to do this.
So let's step back slightly as you
Sure.
suggest by implication that the economy is somehow can be abstracted from its moral grounds. That the economy is no longer a human thing. It's just something floating around there, and it's just a set of logical
Hang
statements.
about.
And
Okay. I'll
because
let you.
it is always
I,
moral because
I'll
we're
let you
moral
take that.
people.
Okay, I'll let you take that stab at me. I want you to answer me one question.
God.
When was the last time you bought something off Amazon?
2 days ago,
Sure. Do you like?
I even work
Yeah,
for Amazon.
yeah. Do you happen to like the boss of Amazon and his his rocket and space wars and all of these kind of things?
Uh, I what do I think about him? I don't know nearly as much about him because he doesn't go
Oh yeah.
around. He doesn't go to, as far as I know, he
Mm.
doesn't go to a bunch of people and who have quite racist views and talk that they need to defend themselves. And
Trying.
let me finish. He doesn't go to the far right in Germany, which has had a little bit of history with the far right,
Yeah.
and had gone through an awful lot of things, which, by the way, ends up killing 35 million people in Europe. But he doesn't go to those people still cranking on those ideas with highly racist views and say, you need to defend to the life your cultural purity. He doesn't, as far as I know, fund people with high anti-Islamic agendas. He
Mm.
doesn't do any of that. He might be a total utter arsehole. I suspect he is. I know he's getting involved in arms trades and all of that, as big companies
Does,
do,
does,
and a lot
does
of
he
them
run?
do. But
Does he run warehouses with people on 0 hours contracts?
I'm
With
sure, I'm sure he's a total asshole.
yeah,
But he's not
okay.
going shouting about. He's not going to the world.
What?
He's running his model. I'm sure he's an
What?
awful
Why?
man.
Why? Why? Why
But
do you
but
buy books?
here's the difference. If he
Mm,
starts tomorrow going, get rid of the Jews, that's the last day I'll use Amazon, because he's trying to get, not because I feel that Jewish, but he's trying to get rid of me. If he says get rid of guys over 50, last day
mm,
I'd use it, he's trying to get me a review. You're getting involved with a company, supporting a company
mm.
that actually their owner not only not not only has is modeling forms of economy whereby you get this uber rich person with a strong political agenda, he's actually attacking the very thing that you treasure most highly in your
It's
life.
fantastic. It's a fantastic point. Um, I can tell you my views on it. They might not necessarily be right.
Okay.
I have two views on this, actually, but it's a great point you've made, Jonathan. My first view is that the Prophet Muhammad was boycotted. He did not boycott. This is my personal view. I don't think lots of people, even from my faith, will agree with what I'm saying, right? Because, I think BDS, for example, which is, I think, boycott, divest, and sanction, is, against Israel, is a really popular thing in most British Muslims. I don't really believe in it. I don't believe you should ostracize people, even for their political views, right? Because the Prophet Muhammad, if you know his life story, um, there's a year of sorrow in Mecca, where he was completely boycotted and ostracized, and it was an extremely difficult year for him. So I don't believe in it from a religious or theological point of view. Maybe I'm wrong in that. That's my personal view, right? The second thing is that if I'm buying a car, for example, I am, in terms of the Tesla, right? I am paying for the engineering of all of the people who worked in Tesla, right? I'm paying for the metal, I'm paying for the product, I'm paying for the tech. Um, it's isn't it just performative and piecemeal to just think about the person who owns the company and say that I'm paying for him? I'm sure he gets a small premium on what I buy, on what I spend in the car, but essentially I should be thinking about what works for me, right? Because it's a simple transaction. Why do I need to bring morals into everything that I do? If I end up like this, then I will just be completely paralyzed. I'll give you an example. Today, I happened to check my tax. If you go on the
Mhm.
gov.uk website, you can find out where your tax bill is being spent. Have you ever done this?
No, I can do it with the council tax. It gives me a breakdown. I mean, that's
Oh
because
no!
it's
Okay,
sent
so,
to
so I
me.
think George Osborne brought this in. It was
Mhm.
very controversial at the time, but so basically, 20% of my tax is spent on welfare,
Mhm.
20% on the NHS. I seem to remember 10% on education, about 10% uh, on debt interest.
Mhm.
10% of and it gives me a figure
Mhm.
according to how much I've paid. Right, debt interest is absolutely forbidden in Islam. Is to pay
Mhm.
interest, right? So what should I do? Should I just stop paying taxes because the government's paying interest with my money? I mean, I can't.
Well,
I'm a creature in this worldwide economy.
okay,
I have to accept. Yeah.
no, because there must be a workaround to the debt interest. I'm sure there's
Oh,
routes,
sure.
because
I'll pay.
this is what
I'll
religions do.
I'll pay.
They find themselves with a rule and they find themselves a route around it. I mean, this is.
Sure, sure. I'll pay 10% less tax next year. I'm not paying this
But
bit.
so what you're saying is, when it comes to the matter of money,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. So you could, let's take Israeli arms firm, uh, Raphael. You could invest,
Hmm.
if it was doing well, you'd invest in it. If you take one of these mining
Wow.
companies
That's that
that strip out a
that
village Well, you'd invest in it, would you? Because it doesn't matter. Does it matter? Is economy moral or not?
Okay, these are fascinating questions. A few years ago, I got just a small amount of money out, and with my brother, and I thought we want to learn about the stock market and just how to invest in that. So just put a small amount of money, nothing huge, and I thought, oh, okay, we think war is going to be big business, so we invested in 5 or 6, I think, of those companies, not a huge amount, and then I was thinking, shall I do this? Shall I not? Am I investing in war? Well, anyway, the stock didn't happen to rise. Then I happened to see one of the CEOs talk about something about drone warfare, which just disgusted me, right? I mean, it just really got me to the, to the pit of my stomach. And I just called my brother, said, take all the money out, just liquidate it completely. I want nothing to do with this. But of course, that's just me as one small player. There's billions and billions of dollars and pounds invested in this. What difference does it make if I have 500 invested in a certain company or not? It makes absolutely no difference, doesn't it?
So, in other words, the price doesn't actually go up and down to do with people buying and selling because no one makes any difference.
Well, I mean, my
so what changes the price?
My contribution doesn't make any difference, does it?
So you don't change.
Johnson, I had at that time I had developed a more nuanced position, which looking back is probably rubbish. What I was saying is, these companies, they make money. They make money when they float on the market and they sell their shares to investors. That's how they make their money. That's the whole point of having a share. If I'm buying shares that have already been floated, I'm just investing in the secondary market. The money isn't actually going to the company itself, is it? I'm just buying a product from some financial house.
As you know, as you purchase it, you affect its price in a slightly upward direction.
Minusculely.
Because you create demand, right? So look, here's you. You're not a big player. You're not a big investment house.
No.
And so the board isn't going to call you and ask you to, do something. None of that's going to happen. So here we are. We're just dust in the system. There's nothing much we can do. As long as we don't gather together. Once we gather together, we could sit there and we could ask for our money back. We could sit there and say we refuse to spend any money for the next 10 days as a protest. We could sit collectively, the population, and just turn the electricity off for one day, just to say we've had enough, sort this thing out. We could stop buying from Amazon for a week to say we want better conditions. We could turn around and say, that's it. The Tesla doesn't leave the garage until this man shuts up. And the stock price would change dramatically because the company becomes unstable. Now, we're not going to do any of that. And we're not really going to do much about climate because we're just going to do the next thing and the next thing because we're still going to seek the pleasures and we're still going to seek the ease. And that's where we're attracted to. Imagine if you're a nail and you've got to pass through some magnets. At some point, you'll just go ping and stick to a magnet and your journey will be changed because there's something in you that's a bit magnetic and it's attracted to these things. Well, there's something in us that is attracted to easiness. There's something in us.
Oh, no. Look, I think that is... Look, I think that's facetious, okay?
Why is that facetious? Says the man who says, "Oh, I can't do anything." Well, that's easy. I can't do anything.
Jonathan, when I was a young man, 24 years ago, this was absolutely seminal to my understanding of life and my cynicism. 24 years ago, I was a very young man, and George Bush and Tony Blair were preparing to invade Iraq. There were massive demonstrations. I went on those demonstrations. In one of those demonstrations, you probably remember, I think there were 2 million people who congregated. in the streets of London. I think that the figure might have been debated about a little bit. But there were loads of people. It was
Mhm.
jam packed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What happened? That happened 24 years ago.
Mhm.
I was against that, adventure by the
Mhm.
West in the Middle East, and have been against every subsequent adventure
Mhm.
in the Middle East since then. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I wasn't actually that much against the Afghanistan war in 2001. I thought that there was possibly just cause, but even that has just turned into complete disaster. Um, what that I can't tell you how much I lost faith in the system at that point. In February, I think February 2003, we all marched. In March 2003, they launched a war. It was a disaster. Hundreds of
Mhm.
thousands of Iraqis died. And I think British servicemen also died. I think maybe 500 or 600.
Mhm.
But the hundreds of thousands of Iraqis
Mhm.
died. Nobody cared about them. And they kept invading countries after countries after countries,
And you and,
including
and you voted Blair,
Libya.
and you voted Blair Black in the next election. That's how
I
much
didn't
you
do
care.
no,
But
I
that's what
didn't.
the population did.
Well, they did, didn't they?
Hmm.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? And this is not. This is in no way a justification. But that is what the 7/7 bombers said. They said that um, th- that was their casus belli, right? You know,
That was their
um,
what?
that was their reason for war, right? You know that
Well,
you as a British people are responsible for all of.
that
I don't believe that.
that was
I don't
that was
believe
that
that.
was their self-justifying mechanism. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
yeah. No, I don't believe that. But I took the route that this doesn't work. I mean, I vote, I engage in the system because I have to, and because been given a
okay.
vote.
So
But
so what does that
what
tell
can I
you?
do?
What?
What
Okay,
can I do?
so here we are. We're in a world now with these very the power has shifted yet again. So you had these sort of senses which never
Mm,
were democracies in an ideal sense. There's always been a whole set of interests and business interests and all sorts of things going on. But you have this thing, but now it's almost been superseded by these people who own the infrastructures of communication becoming incredibly powerful and incredibly resource rich and able to actually to have far more power than we should ever give one person. Whereas government itself
Johnson,
became
you know what?
government itself was institutional, and therefore the powers, even at its worst, it was far harder unless it was a dictatorship. But of course, with a company, it often has dictatorship qualities to it. So we're in this system, and of course, the conversations everyone's having nowadays is about their powerlessness. This is what everyone's talking about. What can we do? We don't know what's going on, or we think we know. Oh, and as I said, someone I respect him. But I said, "Oh, you're down that rabbit hole." He said, "Well, yes, but I." Uh, it's become an everyday conversation. So the conversation is about powerlessness. So my question to you is, what are you in society now? What is the society you live in where you don't feel there's anything you can do? What does that say about what life is at the moment? We have a climate which you think
Mm,
is racing towards disaster. It may already have hit a tipping point. We have the powerlessness of being able to do about it. We have the dependency on all these infrastructures that can just contribute to this getting worse and worse. We have ideologies of those elites that this is exactly what they had predicted, and they've built this sort of death cult around themselves, which they then separate themselves out of as some sort of uh, hyper narcissistic super bubble about everyone else. Um, this is where we live. Who are we? What is it? What does it mean to be alive in the world like this for you?
mm. I think that's a fascinating question, Jonathan. Well, I suppose the thing is, what does it feel to um be a speck and to have a voice that's unheard. I don't think this is just about me. I think this is about a lot of us, isn't it? You know, across the spectrum, right?
Mhm.
Um, and for us, you know, to be disempowered, to be told that we have democracy, sovereignty, which is what we're told in this country, but not actually really to be able to affect anything or to change anything, right? You know, if you don't like the fact that, I don't know, your bin collection is, you know, every 2 weeks and you want it every week, do you really, Jonathan, have the power to change that? I can tell you that I don't. I don't have the power to change the potholes outside my road. I don't have the power to change British foreign policy. I don't have the power to. The other thing I found really fascinating when I was looking through the tax um, breakdown, and so I went every year from 2021 to now, right? So 5 years of tax breakdown. Yeah. Um, it doesn't actually, Jonathan, it doesn't actually change very much. It's not like the welfare spend is
Mhm.
30% one year and 10% the next. It's basically 21 to
Okay.
22%. It
Can we,
it it, it, it
let's
doesn't
come
change.
back to it. So you're powerless.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be alive as a powerless actor?
Well, then you're subjected, isn't it? You are uh, you are subjected to. You are carried along by currents which you have no control over.
And what if the people who have more control have a belief that actually this is what human beings are? They're just copying what's going along, and it's got nothing to do with them. What if you think? What if they were thinking something like that? That
Well,
they're projecting your behaviour as something internal to you, which has nothing to do with them.
I think, Jonathan, there's a lot of poor thinking in the elites of of the world, right? And in some of these meta theories. I would argue with you, Jonathan, that you need to go back to the traditional ancient wisdoms which have stood the test of time. You know, which talk about community, which talk about, uh, for want of a better word, brotherhood, which talk about oneness, which talk about equality and dignity, fraternity, all of these kind of things, right? You know, what we've got are these really poorly tested ideologies which are going to fail. Just like 50, 60 years ago, we had ideologies of Nazism, fascism, communism. They all failed, isn't it? They had disastrous outcomes and consequences. This kind of uber capitalism that we are rapidly approaching is also going to fail. And these new theologies have not been properly tested either, Jonathan, have they?
Do you know what I see this podcast as? I often see it like this. I've never told you because
Yeah,
in a way we're talking shouting into the air. We're just
yeah,
talking to
yeah.
nothing. But it does remind me of those people who, in times of impending doom or
Mm,
impending disaster, write a message and bury it in a canister in the ground for those who might find the place later should they come across it. And we know this happens in history. People leave these
mm.
messages in the most extreme situations. And I think for me, this is what this is. This is a message.
Well, that's because
This is a message buried down, and maybe somewhere, eons away.
maybe.
Someone looking at this will come across this amongst all the stuff out there, and this is what we're talking about. This thing is, for
But
me, this thing is
yeah,
just
I
is.
know. I agree with you on a couple of fronts. Firstly, we're not getting enough subscribers, so if you're watching this, please subscribe. Please press the subscribe button now. Um, but the second thing is, and I think we've had these conversations as well. Even if we don't get subscribers, we would still do this, right? You and me. Even
Mhm.
if we don't get loads of views. And why are we doing it? I think we're doing it for our own sanity, isn't it? I'm doing it for my own sanity. I get left with all these feelings that I can't express. I need to talk them out. I need to understand a little bit about what's going on. I'm very lucky to have you as a friend, you know, who will kind of test out ideas, kind of reflect them back on myself, challenge them a bit. But I couldn't not do this. I'd just go mad.
And why? Why is that? I mean, I relate, but why?
Yeah, I think actually, if we go back to this idea of powerlessness, there's two things that happen in that state, right? Yeah, this is very Kleinian type position, right? Klein talks about
That's Melanie
that.
Klein, yeah?
That's right. Yeah, she talks about the depressed position and the paranoid position, right? But the depressed position is this kind of learned helplessness. I was speaking to my children about a book by George Orwell called Animal Farm. I don't know if you remember. There's the donkey, right? I think his name is Boxer, right? He just accepts what is going on by what he's being told, by Napoleon and the other pigs who are running the farm, and then ends up kind of dying of exhaustion, just trying to work harder, and that's one position you can take. You just It's a learned helplessness. You just have to keep working as hard and just accept your fate and accept your system. And the other position that you can take with all this pressure on you is this kind of psychotic position. And sometimes it does come across, Jonathan,
What
as
is
kind
what
of,
is what is the psychotic position?
well, it's this kind of position where you're angry with the world, where you are arguing with the whole system. You'll see this especially on what's called the radical left, right? They just look mad. They get dismissed as people who are mad, and they just will not give an inch. But essentially, what they're doing is they're trying to resist this overwhelming tendency to accept that this is normal, and that kind of position you see again and again.
What is normal? What's
The
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 this?
the, the kind of oppression, the system that you're being pushed into,
Mm.
and that could be related to the economic system. It could be
But hang
related
on,
to,
hang on. But
yeah.
surely the radical left, they have Walter Benjamin. They know that the history of the state of emergency is the history of for the oppressed. The state of emergency is not an exception. This is
Hmm.
history, and we got as we were saying last week, Latour 2016 saying the same sort of thing, saying that what we're going through now as the earth as the earth takes battle with us, and we expect it to come to the negotiating table, and it won't because it's the planet. It can't do that, but politically we're still stuck in that mindset. But we're starting to go, oh, hang on, we're being dispossessed. We're being dispossessed by the power structures. We're being dispossessed by a climate which might go beyond our control. But this is the experience of the colonized, and this is the experience of the dispossessed. People have lived this for hundreds of
Mm.
years, and now we're sort of joining in, and we're going, oh, we don't like it, but it was always there. Now we're
Sure.
powerless too, and we don't
Yeah.
like it.
So we're left between these positions, aren't we? You know, and so the simple ways of thinking about that is, what if Greta Thunberg was right? Right? She's been reprimanded so many times, and been she's called this kind of she's almost this kind of hate figure. Initially she was this great child who was foreseeing and telling us about the future and the rest of the world, but now she's this kind of hate figure on the right.
Oh, so she's a hate because, of course, we all have our
There
hates
are
and
there,
our
there
loves.
are
So
no no
who does I didn't even know she was still going, but what's
yeah,
she's a hate figure for
for
people?
I suppose the climate skeptics, you would say. There are these hate figures, Jonathan.
Right.
I mean, she's one of them. Ed Miliband is another one, right? Yeah, you'll come across all these people who are just seen as completely beyond the pale, and a whole projection is embodied in them. And the problem with them is that they just won't shut up.
The thing is,
Yeah.
as you say that, the research, public opinion. part of me comes in. I can see the focus group. Here's Greta. What's a few things that come up about Greta? Okay. And they'll say, we've got some messaging with Greta. Greta's this, Greta's that. Ed's this, there's that. And we'll see which ones land, and we'll just leave her those ones. Giving people what sort of works for them. A nice service of news that fits with your own thinking. That's going on in the background. As long as there's funding for it, that's what's going on. There's people like me finding out those things which will lever us a bit more towards going against those arguments.
And you're working for those ultimately, in some form or fashion, you're working for those same billionaires that you're railing against.
I'm working for all sorts of people. And of course, it's very funny. I was writing in my sort of journal about this because I found myself on another job where I start staring into the abyss, because what I love about my job is I do get to stare into the horror. And don't forget, before doing this, I did a PhD and 15 years looking at conflict and violence. So something about me does like staring into the horror. And my job, I often describe it, it's like being a rivet. You know, that little round thing on the front of a ship? There's lots of other rivets. There's lots of other bits of ship, but I'm like a tiny rivet on the front, and I can see where it's going, or I can see a little bit of where we're going. And I can see that from the questions they want me to ask, and from the answers we get, and from what people are satisfied with and what they'll go along with and what they want and what they need. And I can see where the innovation is taking us. And some of it, of course, it's always enchanting. You think, oh, this is quite good. And there's also this other very awful shadow. So it's like we invite the salesperson in. It's Snow White. We invite the salesperson in with their lovely apples. And if we bite one side, we're fine. But as soon as we bite the other, we're in deep trouble. And this is who we invite into our home. And it's not like we have much choice unless we totally drop off, if this is so easy. We invite them into our home, and we are bound by these relationships. We're bound by the infrastructures that cause us to bring them into the home. And of course, it just disempowers us further and further. And therefore, and this is the saddest thing, I then think, well, I've got power. I can buy myself I love this pen. I'm going to get a box of 12 of this pens. Yes, I've made a good decision. Hey, look, everyone, I've got these pens. They're great pens. And by the way, they are great pens. They are the best pens I've ever used. Hard to use other ones since. And I suddenly have agency. I have agency over what I'm consuming. And I feel good. I think, well, I'm not going to get a Tesla. Look at clever old me. I've got some power back. Or I go, oh, there's nothing I can do. I'll just carry on doing whatever I want to do. You know?
I think
we're trapped.
I think you are a spiteful class warrior, Johnson.
You do? I'm very middle class. How can I be a class warrior?
You're just railing against these billionaires and their entrepreneurial spirit and the innovation that they're going to bring to the planet, and how they're moving this planet forward.
Let me address that in a sense, because in a sense I'm not, because I've never met any of them, and I don't know what that conversation. But of course I can't, because they've anyone who finds themselves where their life stops being on the ground, normal every day. Once we separate ourselves from common experience, the decisions we make are inevitably self-serving, because common experience, everyone's making self-serving decisions. But because they're all more or less living in the same puddle, those decisions more or less work for everyone else in the puddle. But once I take myself out of that puzzle, I start living in a totally different bubble, and I stop living a normal life, as politicians do, as dictators and kings do, as hyper rich elites do. Then the decisions they make are actually driven by their own agendas, which are based upon very different experiences of life. And they then get, ironically, people like me in to run a focus group to find out what ordinary people think. But the questions I'm asking are actually driven by other agendas. And the things driving my questions are driven by wider agendas. So the point I'm trying to make is the further away from equality you get within a society, not that equality is possible, but the further away you get, it's not about fairness. I mean, there might be a moral argument for that. It's actually about efficiency of the common good. And we can look at John Rawls and his thing of, if I were to be the worst off in the society, what would I want the society to be? And that's a good way to proceed. In other words, if we're all roughly in the same boat, whatever decisions are made, even if they're bad, it'll kind of be a kind of bad. But if we're separate, we're putting ourselves as gods just by the very design. And that's not good for anyone, unless you are so narcissistically inclined that you believe in your own greatness. And the trouble is, last point, in order to run one of those companies, every time you're rewarded and the company does well, inevitably you'll believe in your own greatness. If you kept scoring goals, you'll believe in your own greatness. And if you're followed by all these people who invest in your greatness, you believe it even more. And it becomes real. And if you watch any of the dictators, they are consumed by their own greatness. If you watch even people I can think of an example, they won the Nobel Peace Prize. He just went into a cloudland of his own self-importance. He had it in him from a very young age, but it just took another level. Why? What those old texts that you refer to in community are telling you again and again, they're not saying, go out there, be a king. They're not. They're saying, live amongst your community and live a good life amongst your community and be responsible to others. Don't make yourself something different. Help everyone by being with them.
But whilst we don't have that and the world is going a different route, we are possibly facing Armageddon, which is, I think, the subject of a future podcast, which we have to do at some point. So we'll leave it there, just with a reminder to all our loyal viewers, and even not so loyal viewers, to like, subscribe, comment, and make sure you tune in again next week.
And for someone listening into the far distant future, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Musa.